Long ago, before supermarkets filled their shelves with perfectly stacked fruits and veggies that are now available all year, our parents and grandparents had a different way of getting their vegetables. They didn't just buy them, they grew them. Their backyards weren't just for relaxing. They were like mini farms that helped feed the whole family. Those gardens were full of unique flavors that many of us remember from when we were kids. But sadly, a lot of those old varieties are disappearing. In this video, we'll be looking at 7 healthy vegetables that were a big part of our grandparents' gardens. These veggies were not only used to make delicacies back in the day, they helped families get through hard times, created special memories, and honestly taste way better than most of the stuff you find in stores today. These vegetables tell the story of a time when people grew their own food, took care of themselves, valued a simpler life, and were connected to the land. Coming in at number 7 is a vegetable that's tough, dependable, and could handle even the harshest weather while still putting food on the table. At number 7, we have the red Russian kale. Red Russian kale isn't the tough, bitter kale you find in stores today. This variety, with its purple veins and flat green leaves, was a reliable crop for our grandparents, especially in cold weather. What made it special was its ability to survive frost. Instead of dying off, it became sweeter after a cold snap. Even in late fall, families could still harvest fresh greens from their garden. Unlike curly kale, red Russian kale has tender leaves that can be eaten raw, but it tastes best when cooked. Sautéed or added to soups, it turns sweet and soft. Plus, it kept producing for months. Families could pick the outer leaves while the plant kept growing, ensuring a steady supply of food. Number 6. Hubbard Squash. This wasn't just any squash. It was huge in size and thick, had a blue-gray skin, and it looked like something from another world. But our grandparents knew exactly what to do with it. One Hubbard squash weighed around 15 pounds up to a staggering 50 pounds. That's enough to feed a family for weeks. But it wasn't just about size that made our parents and grandparents grow them. The flesh inside was bright orange, super sweet, and had a rich, nutty taste that made it perfect for pies, soups, and baked dishes. Here's what made it so special. This squash could last all winter if stored in a cool, dry place. Back then, when there weren't fancy refrigerators, this was like having a natural storage container full of food. They'd keep these squashes in their root cellars or cool basements, cutting off pieces as needed throughout the cold months. But if you grew up in Washington, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, or New York, even with a garden, chances are there was a rhubarb plant somewhere in the corner. These plants were like old friends because they came back year after year, getting bigger and stronger. Washington, Oregon, and Michigan are among the top U.S. producers of rhubarb. The funny thing about rhubarb is that it looks like red celery, but bite into it and wow, it's super sour. Only the long, thick leaf petioles are edible, as the leaves contain toxic levels of oxalic acid. But our grandparents knew exactly what to do with it. They'd combine it with strawberries or lots of sugar to make the most amazing pies, jams, and sauces. What made rhubarb really special was how tough it was. Once planted, it would keep growing for years to come. Rhubarb belongs to the buckwheat family Polygonaceae and is closely related to garden sorrel. Unlike cacti, rhubarb needs lots of love, attention, well-drained, fertile soil, and prefers cooler temperatures. Some families today are still harvesting from rhubarb plants their grandparents planted decades ago, as rhubarb plants can live longer with proper care. And speaking of early, rhubarb was usually the first plant you could eat that showed up in spring. This gave families fresh food when there wasn't much else growing yet. Number 4. Golden Bantam corn. Before the days of super sweet hybrid corn, Golden Bantam was the star of the garden. When it first came out in the early 1900s, people didn't trust yellow corn. They thought only white corn was good to eat. But this variety changed everyone's mind. Golden Bantam had something special that our grandparents loved, and that is a real, natural, authentic corn flavor. Not just sweetness, but that deep, rich, true corn taste that made summer meals unforgettable. The plants weren't tall like today's corn, but what they lacked in height, they made up for in flavor. Our grandparents had a rule: don't pick the corn until the water is already boiling. They knew that the moment the corn is picked, its sugars start turning into starch, which affects its taste. And here's a neat trick they used to get the best harvest. They planted Golden Bantam in blocks instead of long rows to help with pollination and get better yields. Number 3. Scarlet runner beans. These weren't your ordinary green beans. Scarlet runner beans were both beautiful and useful, like growing a fence covered in flowers that turned into food. Their bright red flowers attracted hummingbirds and bees, making the garden lively and full of activity. What made these beans special was how they could be eaten in different ways. The young pods were tender and tasty, but if left to mature, they produced large, speckled purple-black beans that could be dried and stored for winter soups and stews. Our grandparents loved how these beans climbed anything: fences, poles, even corn stalks, growing as high as 10 to 15 feet. Plus, they kept producing all summer. The more you picked, the more they grew. Another bonus: they didn't just provide food, they also helped improve the soil, making next year's garden even better. A word on safety. Like many beans, scarlet runner beans contain a natural toxin that can be harmful if eaten raw or undercooked. To make them safe, they must be boiled at high temperatures, at least 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius, for 10 to 30 minutes. Soaking them before cooking also helps remove toxins and makes them easier to digest. But when prepared properly, they're packed with protein, fiber, and important minerals like iron, folate, and magnesium, making them a nutritious and valuable food for everyone, especially seniors in their golden years. Number 2. Crenshaw Melon. This melon wasn't the most common at the food market back in the day. In 21st century, it is almost extinct, but those who knew it really knew it. Crenshaw melons stood out with their large, slightly oblong shape and smooth yellow skin with hints of green. Cut one open, and you'd find a juicy, salmon-colored flesh, one of the sweetest melons around. The fragrance alone could fill a room. Simply put, Crenshaw melons are everything you dreamed cantaloupe melons were. Our grandparents knew the perfect time to harvest them. When ripe, Crenshaws would loosen from the vine, sometimes slipping off naturally or with a light pull. That's when they were at their peak flavor. These melons needed a long, hot growing season, making them popular in places like California, Arizona, Texas, and Florida. But for those who had the patience, they were worth the wait. They typically weighed between 8 to 10 pounds, though some can grow even larger under ideal growing conditions. One Crenshaw was big enough to feed a family of 4 to 6 people, depending on how it is served. If the melon is cut into slices or cubes and served as part of a meal or dessert, it can easily provide several portions for each family member. The taste was so special that people would save seeds from the best ones. Year after year, Crenshaws were mostly eaten fresh, but they were also perfect for fruit salads, smoothies, and even desserts like sorbets. Some even pair them with prosciutto or feta for a refreshing summer dish. Though not as common as cantaloupes or honeydews, they are still grown today and remain a favorite for those lucky enough to find them. Number 1. Brandywine Tomato. If there's one vegetable that captures everything The Brandywine tomato didn't have a perfect-looking shape or smooth flesh. And frankly, nobody cared, because back in the day, people care more about tastes than looks. They were often lumpy, cracked, and came in odd shapes. But slice one open and see the beauty inside it. Taste it, and you will want more. It had a deep red flesh that was almost as juicy as a peach. The flavor was a perfect balance of sweet and tangy, with a richness that modern tomatoes can't match even with their modern-day modifications. Our grandparents would grow brandywines even though they were a bit fussy and took longer to ripen. They knew these tomatoes were worth the extra care. One big slice could cover an entire sandwich, and the flavor was so good that many people would just eat them straight from the garden, still warm from the sun. What made brandywines really special was how they connected families. Everyone had their own saved seeds, passed down through generations, each claiming their strain was the best. These weren't just tomatoes. They were family heirlooms, carrying stories and memories with each seed saved. Finally, these 7 vegetables tell us more than just gardening history. They tell us about a time when food was personal, when gardens meant survival, and when flavors were worth waiting for. Each one carries stories of family dinners, summer harvests, and the satisfaction of growing your own food. What about you? Did any of these vegetables bring back memories from your childhood? Maybe you remember your grandmother's tomato sandwiches or that special pie. Share your stories and comment other vegetables your grandparents grew.